It's been the worst time of my life, Joe. If somebody accused me of raping them or hurting them, I have a 22-year-old daughter. I would never hurt anyone.
Clifton Powell was never convicted of any crime in a court of law, yet the sentence that permanently altered the course of his Hollywood career has already been handed down and cannot be appealed. In the late summer of 2011, an established character actor whose face had become familiar to millions stepped into a New Orleans hotel room and walked out into a storm that would follow him for the rest of his working life. The woman who later filed suit under the pseudonym Keontae Myers alleged that what began as a consensual encounter turned non-consensual when she asked him to stop. Powell, then 55, denied the claim through his representatives with categorical firmness, stating that the accusations were false and that he intended to pursue every available legal remedy. Criminal authorities never brought charges. The civil complaint that followed sought more than $75,000 in damages and kept the matter alive in the public record for years. In 2017, a judge dismissed the suit, citing insufficient supporting evidence and inconsistencies in the plaintiff's account. Powell's subsequent countersuit for defamation and emotional distress was likewise dismissed the following year. Legally, the file was closed. Professionally and personally, the file never was. That is the essential fact upon which every later discussion rests. The courts did not find him liable. The industry and large segments of the public treated the mere existence of the allegation as a form of permanent judgment. Roles that had once come with regularity began to evaporate. Television parts that had been promised for multiple episodes were quietly reduced or eliminated. Producers who had previously valued his reliability grew hesitant, calculating the risk of negative publicity against the value of his presence. In a 2017 conversation with TMZ, Powell described the period as one of the most painful of his adult life, second only to the death of his father years earlier. He spoke of the suspicion he encountered in ordinary public spaces, of the online commentary that declared him guilty long before any courtroom had examined evidence, and of the quiet knowledge that his own children were growing up under the shadow of headlines they had never asked for. Powell's path to that moment had been long and improbable. Born in Washington, D.C., on March 16, 1956, he came of age in the Mayfair Mansions neighborhood of Northeast D.C., a community that offered little cushion against the harder edges of urban life. He attended H.D. Woodson Senior High School before transferring to the Duke Ellington School of the Arts, where the discipline of performance began to shape him. The early loss of his mother and the struggles of a father dealing with alcoholism left him navigating adolescence with limited stability. Those formative years instilled both a fierce work ethic and awareness that would later surface in interviews when he reflected on the fragility of success. By the early 1990s, he had begun to appear in films that demanded authenticity rather than polish. His turn in the 1993 urban drama Menace II Society announced a performer capable of conveying menace and vulnerability in the same frame. The Friday franchise that followed allowed him to display a sharper comedic timing, creating the memorable Pinky, a character whose swagger and verbal precision became part of the cultural shorthand of the era. The 2004 biopic Ray offered a different kind of recognition. Playing Jeff Brown, the loyal road manager to Jamie Foxx's Ray Charles, Powell delivered a performance of quiet steadfastness that earned him an NAACP Image Award nomination for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Motion Picture. The nomination mattered not only as professional validation but as a public acknowledgement that an actor of his complexion and background could occupy a place of respect within a major studio production. Across more than 3 decades and well over 200 credits, he moved between genres with unusual fluidity: crime dramas, romantic comedies, action films, television procedurals. Rarely the leading man, yet consistently the presence that made scenes feel lived in and specific. Directors and casting agents came to rely on that reliability. Audiences, whether they knew his name or simply recognized his face, carried the impression of a performer who understood the weight of every line. Against that backdrop of steady accomplishment, the 2011 allegation landed with disproportionate force. Hollywood has never been a patient industry when reputation is at stake. Studios and networks operate under the constant calculation of brand risk. An actor whose name becomes linked, even temporarily, to serious accusations can find the telephone stops ringing long before any legal resolution arrives. Powell later recounted specific instances in which multi-episode commitments were truncated after only 1 or 2 appearances, the unspoken reason being the cloud that now followed him. The financial consequences were real, but the deeper injury was the erosion of the professional identity he had spent decades constructing. In an environment where perception often outweighs adjudication, the dismissal of a civil case does not automatically restore the standing that existed before the headlines. Layered onto the personal ordeal were the systemic barriers that had already constrained his opportunities. Powell has spoken candidly about encounters in which his skin tone itself became a stated objection. Producers and executives, he recalled, sometimes dismissed him as too dark for the role or expressed concern that his appearance might unsettle certain audiences. The same industry that readily cast him as intimidating or streetwise figures proved far more reluctant when the character required romantic accessibility or quiet vulnerability. In a 2025 interview with the Los Angeles Times, he recounted being dropped by his agent at APA, Jeff Witjes, after accepting a role in the 2005 musical The Gospel. According to Powell, the agent telephoned and asked whether he was doing another one of those little black movies. Powell's reply, "You're damn right. I got a family to feed," was followed by the end of the professional relationship. The anecdote illustrates a larger pattern. The marketability of black stories and black faces has historically been treated as a niche concern rather than a central one, and darker-skinned actors have often borne the sharper edge of that hierarchy. Powell's response to these pressures has been consistent with the pragmatism forged in his youth. He has repeatedly cited advice from Jamie Foxx to keep one foot planted in the communities that first embraced him, arguing that the audience that made him a recognizable figure, African-American viewers, younger white audiences, Latino and Asian fans, women across demographics, deserves continued loyalty. That stance has sustained a working career even after the most visible opportunities narrowed. Yet the narrowing itself remains irreversible. The years during which the civil case dragged on coincided with what might have been the peak of his middle-aged marketability. Those seasons cannot be reclaimed. The finality of the legal dismissal therefore coexists with a different kind of finality, the industry's quiet decision that the association itself carried lasting cost. Personal life offered little insulation. Powell has described the collapse of his marriage and the financial devastation that followed, speaking in later interviews of losses that left him temporarily without a permanent home. He has acknowledged absences from his children's lives during periods of intense work and the subsequent regret that money and gifts could never fully repair. Gambling and the transient company that accompanies sudden visibility added further strain. These admissions do not excuse or explain the 2011 allegations. They simply complete the portrait of a man whose public success masked private volatility. When the accusation arrived, it found a foundation already under stress. The emotional architecture that might have absorbed the blow had already been weakened by earlier losses. What remains most striking is the asymmetry between legal outcome and social consequence. A civil case dismissed for lack of evidence should, in principle, restore a person's standing. In the attention economy of contemporary entertainment, it rarely does. The internet does not retract. Casting directors do not issue corrective memos. Fans who formed their impressions from the initial headlines often never encounter the later dismissal. Powell has continued to work, appearing in projects that value his craft, yet the trajectory that once seemed capable of further expansion flattened. The sentence, in that sense, is final not because a judge imposed it, but because the collective machinery of perception has closed the book. There is a deeper question embedded in the story, one that reaches beyond any single actor. When an allegation of this gravity is made, the accused is immediately required to prove a negative in the court of public opinion while the legal system slowly examines evidence under formal rules. Even when the formal system ultimately finds insufficient basis for liability, the informal system has already rendered its verdict. For performers whose careers depend on continuous visibility and goodwill, that informal verdict can be career-ending. Powell's experience is neither unique nor anomalous. It is simply one of the clearer recent illustrations of how reputation functions as both currency and vulnerability inside the entertainment industry.